see you again. Yeah, that's really good. I'm glad we could put it together, and it's good that you were able to get in here because I haven't talked to you in far too long.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to say to the people in the audience, welcome, welcome in the audience. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Erping Zhang, and he's the executive director of the Asian Research
Association
and the Asian Research Association, and he's well versed in matters relating to China and Asia and the broader world, and we're going to be talking that and other matters. And Erping, so good to see you again. Always good to talk.
Thank you for having me here.
We asked you, we had a little false start before, but could you share your own background, education a little bit? And then we'll talk about that and use that as a launching pad to talk about the state of the world, particularly as it relates to the Asian and China realm.
Well, I was born in Manchuria, China, and I studied in Beijing for my undergraduate school, and then I came to the United States in 1984.
What did you study in undergraduate school?
I majored in English, actually.
In English, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly got the English down.
And then I came here in 1984 for grad school, attending the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and then I've been researching on the China issues and Asian affairs, everything.
Okay, when you were studying at Beijing English, were you thinking you might like to think about coming to the United States for education? Did you have that pattern of thought in mind, or what? Or
what definitely.
You were thinking
most of the students who study foreign language would love to, travel overseas, even though it was not so easy. So.
Yeah. I think a lot of people would like to travel. When you're young, I always wanted to go overseas and venture out and that sort of thing when I was younger.
Yeah, but in China we have a unique situation because of it's still a communist state.
Well, so, we're going to talk about whether it is or is not. I'm getting confused, but anyway, yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not so easy to travel for many people overseas, especially youngsters. So I've been doing a lot of researching on China issues, and recent years I've been spending quite a bit of time doing volunteer work, joining many overseas Chinese communities to help with the victims of the Falun Gong meditation group.
Yes,
and
terrible.
Also, and also many other victims. So it's been quite disturbing to see that happen in all Asian civilizations.
Yeah. We want to try and understand. It's 5,000-year-old civilization. It's a really important civilization, and developments are going on so quickly. It's very important that we can understand that, because it's confusing on many levels and so forth. When you were studying, were you in, let's say, grade school? Let's go back to primary school, or what we'd call high school, that sort of thing. Were you studying then, were you made to study, let's say, Karl Marx and a socialist or the Communist Manifesto and the Great Revolution against the imperialist order, that sort of thing? Was that part of the education or indoctrination that the Chinese youth, when you were very young, were submitted to? And how does that relate? I mean, was that the case, or what was the case in terms of the ideological imprinting they were trying to put upon the younger minds?
My lifetime is very unique. I grew up, my school years, from the elementary, first grade of elementary school, up to my high school, was during Cultural Revolution.
Oh boy!
And so we were required. We were required to chant Mao's Little Red Book and memorize, most of them, and also the political science courses are required, from elementary school up to college. Yeah,
even little infants,
yeah,
right?
and then it's full of propaganda, but it has an impact on many of us because this brainwashing is very hard to get rid of. What we call this Communist Party culture, the culture of indoctrined, propaganda over years. Is still influencing many Chinese people, either inside of China or those of us who even live here for many years in the West. still can see the the impact of that. That's why you notice there's a booklet. It's called the Non-Commentaries on Chinese Communist Party.
Go ahead.
And this book is written by overseas Chinese intellectuals, detailing about the impact and the historical facts about the Chinese Communist Party since 1921, the birth of the Chinese Communist Party up to now, how they have been evolving over the years and influencing the minds of the Chinese people over the years. And incidentally, as I mentioned earlier to you, that this book is being
the number
one censored book in China.
You told me that it was some legitimate survey or something.
Well, the Harvard Law School has a Berkman Center for Internet and Society. It works with the University of Cambridge and University of Toronto, and they did a testing on the Chinese Internet, and they found out the number one censored item in the Chinese Internet is the non-commentaries on Communist Party of China.
That's really interesting because it came from it's a subversive to the order in China piece of literature.
Actually, the book is just like a narrative.
It's like a historical facts.
It's like it's a book talk about the historical facts. But it's very powerful because when you read it, you understand the how the Communist Party in China really have been using all different means to sustain the power and to suppress the people.
And that is the number one censored. Does that mean that they were not able to? They tried to go on the internet to get it, could not do it, and they kept track of things. So the person who was trying to get to it to read it was not able to read it because it was censored? Because I know there's a lot of censorship of New Tang Dynasty television and other kinds of things trying to reach into China. Yeah. And what's the story on that level? Were the commentaries able to get through to those people on the internet who were trying to access it?
It's very, very difficult for users in China to access the non-commentaries or the websites of the New Tang Dynasty TV or other overseas Chinese websites. The reason is the Chinese internet, they only have 3 gateways between the Chinese internet and world cyberspace. So what the Chinese government has done is they just block or filter the 3 gateways. So turning the Chinese internet into an intranet.
Intranet.
So that the users will can only access the filtered content from the overseas.
And many of the cyber companies have gone along with that in order to gain access to that huge market. They've gone along with the censorship that the Chinese powers that be insisted upon.
Yeah, you notice that the Yahoo, Google, Microsoft, and Cisco, all these companies are selling the high-tech to Chinese government to build up this firewall system. It's called Golden Shield.
Golden Shield?
Shield. The Golden Shield project actually was first launched in the year 2000. Initially funded with 800 million US dollars by the Chinese government. And then later the Chinese government appropriated another 1 billion US dollars to beef up. To beef up.
Call it Golden Shield?
This is a firewall system that can effectively block the foreign, like news website like BBC and Wikipedia. These are all prohibited.
Those are all prohibited. Right. Okay. So they can't just get at Google like we're used to being able to do and that sort of thing.
Well, the typical example is if you go to the google.cn and google.com, if you type the Tiananmen massacre. And if you click the image, and then you see total different web pages. If you
flowers and things.
Well, you have total 2 images. One is with the tanks and the massacre, and the other one is just totally
But the
different.
famous thing of the young man standing in front of the tank, I saw a thing on television on Frontline or something, and they said the young people, they were talking to young people, they had never, they were telling the truth, seemingly, they had never seen that famous photograph of the young man standing in front of the tank that all the world has. Well, it effectively blocked it out from the consciousness of young people. They were 20 or something like that.
Yeah, most
amazing that they could block it out like that.
Totally.
Maybe it's not so amazing than we realize, because there's a lot of that kind of thing going on in terms of the media here also, but not to the degree that apparently it is in China. Yeah.
I've talked to people from China about the man you talk about standing in front of the tanks in 1989, and most of the young people have never heard about it.
Yes, it's amazing.
And also the other thing is we just mentioned, the NTD TV, the New Times TV website is being censored. Because I'm doing the volunteer work on human rights issues for the Falun Gong, and I found out this #2 censored, item on the Chinese is the Falun Gong, and then all the websites, blocked, and you only can see the Chinese government propaganda against the meditation group. You don't see that. By the way, the meditation started in 1992 by Mr. Li Hongzhi.
Was he in Queens for a while?
Well, he lives in New York right now in the U.S. And when the meditation, the funny thing is that when the meditation was first started in 1992, it was endorsed by the Chinese government for health and moral elements. The meditation is simple. It only has 5 exercises. The 4 standing exercise and 1 sitting meditation. And there's a core principle for truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, which are just...
Truth, compassion, tolerance?
Tolerance.
These are some of the things that encourage you.
These are the
subversive things.
Well, it's just ironic, the government... No. The government actually, endorsed this practice. The reason is in the early 90s, the Chinese Sports Commission and a hospital in Beijing, they did a 1-year survey, observation research on about 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners in Beijing. And they did a 1-year study and follow up and see how beneficial the practice was. And after the 1-year study, the government released a report, health report, and showcasing all the health benefits. So they decided to promote it in China and also overseas. So even the Chinese Consulate General in New York even held seminars to promote the practice in the 90s.
Of Falun Gong.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And only in 1997, when the Ministry of Public Security were doing an internal survey on the Chinese population, they found out there were 70 to 100 million Chinese are doing this.
In China, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people, so they got scared because any groups outside the Communist Party control, outside of the Communist Party ideology, would be perceived as a threat.
And I said to you, I've been doing programs forever. And I always used to say to people, I won't air it if you don't want me to. And I've only had one person ever say they didn't want it aired after we'd taped the program, because I'm not trying to find something out that's bad. And it was a group from China that had done Qigong, and they were doing it for health purposes, and they were afraid they were going to be connected to Falun Gong, and that there's a conflict on, because the Falun Gong relates to the spiritual Lao Tzu or Confucian or Buddhism, that was spiritual message that conflicts with the spiritual message of Marx, that is the ideology of the state, and that's being held in order because that's the source of the power of the communist government, and they don't want any competition to their ideological take on the organization of society and the universe. Is that more or less correct?
Yeah, it's tragic to see that Qigong, which is energy practice, meditation, which originally stemmed from Buddhism and Taoism, try to disassociate themselves with the roots, just to survive or please the current communist government, which you mentioned earlier so correctly, that communism itself is a religion.
It was, I think, in Russia, in Soviet Russia, or in the minds of many left-wing people in the world. That is thought of. Karl Marx is like even though he said religion is an opiate of the people, it's almost like a religious faith and forms the basis of much of what is called the left progressive community. They worship at the feet of Karl Marx or Trotsky or that kind of a take against the imperialists who have been running the world throughout most of the history of the world.
Yeah,
Confusing.
It is. The tragic thing is that recently, I don't know if you noticed, the former Canadian Secretary of State for Asia Pacific, David Kilgour, and also David Matas, who is a very respected human rights attorney, who is a legal counsel for Amnesty International, they jointly produced a report about Bloody Harvest, which detailing about the information of how the government of China is taking organs out of the Falun Gong practitioners held in labor camps for international market. And they even have a website listing the price of these organs.
Kidney, of liver, or
and the funny thing is that the Chinese government...
It's so grim.
It is, it is.
And it's being documented.
It's documented.
It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's being documented as apparently the case, and that's just not people who had volunteered their organs. It was harvesting.
It is appalling. It is really appalling. If you look at the website of Chinese organ transplant hospitals, and then on their website, hospital website, they said, we want to show our appreciation to the judicial branch, to the police, to the the Chinese court system. Why the heck they sunk?
Do they admit to the fact that these are involuntarily taken, or do they try to say these are all voluntary things? Because we have a problem in the United States. I just had a friend who passed because he was on a donor list. He needed a kidney or something, I forget. Couldn't get it, there weren't enough, and he passed. And we should have more organ donations from the citizens who put it in their will or something that you can use the organ. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
Do the Chinese recognize that it is not just voluntarily that these organs are taken and passed on, or what is their take or their position on that issue?
Well, what happens in all the Confucian culture, not only in China but in Taiwan, Japan, and also in Hong Kong and Korea, there is a tradition against taking any part of body system outside the body. They believe people should die as a whole piece. So there's no donor culture in China. And the Chinese health minister already admitted in a international conference that 99% of the organs in China come from the prisoners. And they are going to try to reduce that. And because of the report by the Canadian government...
Are these prisoners who are condemned to death?
They claim that they are condemned to death, but if you...
That's a very dangerous
if you take their heart out, they're going to die. If you take their heart out, you only have one heart.
You see some of the Monty Python movies where they're going to do it and they hit them on the head because they were ready for the death wagon, they claim from the executed prisoner, but the fact shows that it's not, because the reason is, according to Amnesty International, each year there are only about 3,000 to 4,000 executions in China. Then how could you have 60,000 kidney transplants then? It's hard to do the math there, isn't it?
It cannot justify.
Okay, those are executions, but and there hasn't developed, that's ancient times you're talking about, they did not believe. I don't think there was much thought of organ transplantation back in the 15th century, and so we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the growth, the capability, you couldn't do it, much less all the things you can do now. But it must have evolved among certain centers of the Chinese culture, realizing that the use of organs that should have grown in the secular world if nothing else. There would have been people who would volunteer. I know people that volunteer to have their organs harvested after they pass, because it's a humane thing to do. In fact, I think it's something that we recommended. Isn't there a lot of that in China also, or not?
Well,
it's a humanitarian position to take.
Ideally, that people should, donate the organs on a voluntary basis.
Yes, of course. I do think that's important.
But that's not the case in China because of the traditional culture is against, organ donation, and this, would you call it a superstition or cultural tradition, against that. In the United States, I learned that usually one has to wait about 5 years to get a kidney. There's a long waiting list. But in China, on the website, they promise you an organ within a week or 2 weeks. So they must have all the prisoners, the blood tests. They have an organ bank, data bank. And then foreigners in with a lot of cash, foreign currency. If they come here, then they kill a prisoner, and then to make money. And
this is an incredible charge.
This is
that they're running such a thing, and there's more and more evidence that is not just some outlandish propagandistic tale or big lie, like
Yeah.
Mr. Goebbels would have said, but that it actually takes place. It's staggering, yeah.
Exactly. Because of the Canadian report, the Chinese government passed a law last year to ban the so-called practice in the organ transplant industry.
But there's a lot of money in organs, right?
Well, there's so much money.
If there's a lot of money in organs, that's a very dangerous situation.
Apparently, the law did not work because this year they passed another law to ban the so-called organ transplant abuse. Because the abuse apparently did not stop, so the World Medical Association is pressuring Chinese Medical Association that you have to stop this practice because there are reports of Western and Asian organ patients going to China to pay a lot of money to get an organ transplant. And just recently, I think a month ago,
Mel Brooks could, or the Python people could do a wonderful movie parody on this.
Yeah,
they did do a thing like that. Where they're going in to take the liver out of a woman, and no, I'm not ready to have a go, and they just, forced it.
Yeah. And
it's satirical,
It is.
Humorous, almost absurd. Yeah.
What happens is one would imagine with the Olympics games coming up, with all the international trade with China, globalization, and this kind of atrocity can still take place in this day and age, and yet there's not enough international condemnation of these kind of atrocities. And
what do the Chinese authorities say when these things emerge in responsible quarters and so on? Do they say, well, that's just nonsense, or that's propaganda? Do they deny it, or do they try to do they try to finesse it in some way, or what do they say in the charge of this? Because I see quite a bit of, particularly like Epoch Times reports this regularly and that kind of thing. But
well, they initially denied it, but then they passed a law to ban it. And then recently they reached agreement in Copenhagen with the World Medical Association, claiming that they will stop this practice. But it's kind of a subtle admission from the Chinese government that they had the abuse. Otherwise, why would you pass two laws to stop the abuse? On the other hand, we have no evidence that they have stopped the abuse because there's no independent investigation team allowed to go to China to check on this.
Amnesty?
No, the Canadian delegate, the investigator has been trying to get a visa to go to China.
Can't go to China?
They cannot get a visa.
But aren't there a lot of people going to China now? Aren't
well,
there a lot of back and forth going? I mean,
but not on the, like a mission to investigate on the rights abuse.
Not too many visas for investigative reporters.
Yeah, I mean, even Manfred, the UN rapporteur for torture and abuse from UN Human Rights Commission has been trying to go to China, and for years he couldn't go there, and then he finally got a chance to go there, and then he would not be allowed to go to the prisons he wanted to go to, and he also has written letters to the Chinese government about these allegations of organ harvesting, and got all the nonsense reply from the government of China, and it's so hard for independent human rights representatives to go to China to look at the facilities. On the other hand, you have all these prepared propaganda to deny these allegations. I just hope that the international community can use the leverage of trade to stop the abuse. For example, in the year 2003, there's a SARS outbreak in China. When people stopped going to Beijing to trade, trade shows or exchange programs, then Beijing finally, after 5.5 months, admitted that they had SARS. That is already 3 months after the WHO, the World Health Organization, issued a travel alert.
I think Epoch Times broke that.
Yeah, that was good for the Epoch Times and New Tang Dynasty TV.
And New Tang also, yeah.
They were the first.
Media entities people should be more aware of.
Yeah, they were the first ones to break the news to the Chinese people.
Right.
Thanks to them, because a lot of people, lives being saved from this. And you mentioned the New Tang Dynasty TV. Actually, they are producing the Chinese traditional art show in Beacon Theater on December 18th to 26th.
It's a wonderful show. I was there and at Radio City afterward for the New Year. It's magnificent. Vina Lee and the choreography it's traditional with the dragons and everything. And that, again, that recalls ancient cultural tradition because the culture goes back 5,000 years. We go a couple hundred years in the United States. It's an old, rich culture. And New Tang Dynasty was a particularly enlightened dynasty, I understand.
Exactly.
Right? It's spelled Tang, but it's pronounced Tang, I think, right?
Yeah, Tang Dynasty.
Yeah, and it was a particularly enlightened one. That's the New Tang Dynasty television taking their name from that.
Yeah, and this TV show will be it will be broadcast. This stage show. It will have combinations of the Chinese traditional artists and also the Western artists like ballet and
it's a magnificent show, one and all, and it's open to. I mean, people. We'll let them know how to get in touch. We're going to show a little clip. In fact, maybe we could do it now.
Yeah, why not?
We have a little clip. We have about a 3-minute clip, and we're talking with Erping Zhang. He's involved with the Chinese cultural scene here in the United States and political, and so maybe we could try and get that set up in the booth. We'll run that, and then we'll come back and we should run that, and they're going to set that up in the booth and run it. And that's going to be on the 18th, is that it?
From 18th to 26th.
Right, at Beacon. That's
Beacon
up on
Theater,
Broadway,
in New
uptown.
York. Yeah,
and then they're going to do it again in New Year. When is the New Year this year?
It should be January 2008.
And that they do
will do it
Radio City.
Radio City.
That is a huge venue. That's a huge venue. It's a great show. It really is.
Yeah, a lot of people, going there. It was,
absolutely. I was there with packed Radio City Music, and it was great. It was great the whole night. It's fantastic. So I hope maybe we're ready to run that now. Then again, Erping Zhang, he's going to show a little piece about the cultural celebration that's coming up here in New York City after December 18th and New Year's in January. So if you could run that DVD now, it'd be good, and then we'll come back and talk more after that's completed.
Bringing you one step closer to divine beauty. New Tang Dynasty Television presents the Chinese New Year Spectacular. This is a show that will transport you into an incredible ancient land, the land of the true China. Chinese classical dance, costumes inspired by ancient Chinese scrolls, and music that blends technique from the West with melodies from the East.
It just took me away to another universe. Really, really lovely.
I was very impressed. It was colorful. It was beautiful.
Orchestra was fabulous.
I was enchanted by every moment of it.
NTD TV's Chinese New Year Spectacular burst onto the scene in 2004 with 7 shows in 5 cities. Each year, the show has grown in scale and popularity. In 2008, the Spectacular will have over 100 shows in more than 40 cities, making it the largest Lunar New Year celebration in the world.
We want to present the best of 5,000 years of Chinese history can provide to the Western and Asian audience.
Each of our dance and music performance conveys a simple message and character. It's simplistic, expressive, and people find it very powerful.
It's a show that not only entertains, but it inspires you to learn and open your eyes.
I know more about Chinese culture as a result.
China was once called the land of divine. In ancient China, every part of society, from emperors to scholars to farmers, lived in harmony with heaven. And in turn, heaven bestowed upon China the gifts of its culture, philosophy, its painting, its music, and dance. Sadly, since the 1950s, and especially during the Cultural Revolution, much of this divine culture has been lost under communist rule. Today, a revival of these lost traditions has begun, and New Tang Dynasty Television is guiding the way. Its annual Chinese New Year Spectacular is leading the renaissance of a true Chinese culture to bring back the arts and values that made China a divine land.
I think it's just so important that people get a sense of Chinese history from something other than the Communist Party lens and propaganda.
Donc ça c'est très intéressant et c'est aussi très émouvant parce qu'il y a une dimension spirituelle qui s'est perdue en Chine actuellement.
向こうがなんかの政治宣伝でただ叫んでるだけの劇だとしたら、こっちは心を柔らかくするような、なんていうの、人間の魂がこう入ってるような劇だったと思いますけど。
In 2006, NTD-TV introduced The Holiday Wonders, a festive show featuring some of the best of Western and Eastern music and tradition on the same stage to celebrate the holiday season.
Their incredible spectacular has become the #1 way for New York families to celebrate the new year.
The show is not made in China, but it will fulfill your Chinese dream.
None of this would have been possible without the dedication of hundreds of artists, sponsors, and thousands of volunteers. We look forward to working with you to make the 2008 Spectacular the grandest and most enjoyable yet. A new year, a new beginning. NTD-TV's Chinese New Year Spectacular.
That's good.
Very good. It is, and I'm here to say I've been there. It's really good. I'm looking forward to trying to see it again this year, and that's really very good. 5,000 years is a long time, a rich tradition in that. And you had all your education. We go back to the education, and they said, these people that said they didn't want me to air the program, it was because it was going to recall some of that ancient tradition, the spiritual tradition, and that is a threat to the ideology of the Communist Party. I saw your leader, Mr. Hu, the other day talking before the Chinese assembled, had a big meeting of the Chinese, and he was speaking, it was being translated, of course, and he was speaking about Karl Marx, and he was talking about socialism, and he was talking about the socialist challenge and all that sort of thing. And I wonder if maybe you can help me set me straight. What is it that they still claim the Marxist mantle, or a Marxist, almost religious religion is a opium of the people, a secular, Marxist, dialectical, materialistic, from Germany inherited idea of political economy and the means by which a society is to be organized? And do they claim that mantle? I can't understand how they could be talking about it when it seems so openly in league with what they used to call the imperialists, and so capitalistic with gated communities. And as I understand it, something like 87,000 demonstrations on basis of human rights violations by that authoritarian system. Can you help set me straight, having had experience? And what are we to make of him talking the socialist panel, that we represent socialism? Because that is what involves so much of what we call the progressive community here. They must be confused.
Yeah. As am I. Yeah. Well, what happens is the Chinese Communist Party label themselves still to this day as the faithful communist
dictatorship of the proletariat,
and also on behalf of Marxism. But the reality is debatable. What we were seeing is there's a debate within the China study community that whether it's a capitalist, whether it's a state capitalist, whether it's a socialist with Chinese characteristics, or whether it's potentially maybe a Fourth Reich, like the Nazi state, socialist.
What is it?
I give a term. It's called neo-communism.
Neo-communism.
What happens is I did a comparative study of the Chinese system under Mao in terms of politics and economics, and also the present politics and economics. For example, in China under Mao, we had basically an isolation communist style, like in North Korea. We did not have a globalization. We did not have trade relations with the West.
Interlocking.
Yeah, it's very much isolated.
And that's a part of the Chinese tradition for a good part
and
of the
also
time,
they had a paramount leader who is unchallenged, and there's a set of ideology like Maoism, and so similar to when Lenin and Stalin was in former Soviet Union, you have their own set of ideology, whereas today you don't have the leaders do not have necessarily a set of ideology of their own.
It's not Marxism?
It's not.
Do they still have the kids required to read Marx?
Well, they still...
you had to read it when you were in school?
Yeah, I was reading that when I grew up. It required classes. Even today, it's required classes.
It's required to read Karl Marx?
Yeah, it's required. Yeah.
The Capitalist Manifesto? I mean, the Communist Manifesto?
Exactly.
Okay.
But still, they have modified, however, in reality, from the traditional communism. Because if you look today, there's globalization, there's trade, there's integration of the world economy, China today, and also in China, capitalists can join the Communist Party today.
It's confusing.
It is confusing.
Because that used to be the enemy class, the capitalists. They called them the imperialists.
Exactly. That's why I label it as a neo-communism, because it's really, today you see an interest group, basically the Communist Party officials, their children, the secret police, the military, and some foreign capital. They are a combination of this interest group in order to maximally to procure power and profit for them own. It's really a very
it looked like robber baron.
It is almost a gangster.
Okay. That's interesting to me. Is that way?
Yeah.
And they've been in a. Has it essentially been co-opted by the imperialists? And that they've adopted our ways. They have gated communities. They have SUVs. One of them said it's good to be rich. It's good to be a capitalist. The idea of being equitable distribution to people that was part of the socialist Marxian view of things has been just gone. And is there not? And you said the 9 commentaries traces what's going on. And there are many people who think that the regime in China that is now touted by all our business leaders as the great growth thing and the future and that sort of thing, might actually fall under the weight of the violations of human rights, elemental human rights and so forth, in a command society that will not be able to be sustained. What about looking at things that way? Is that a possibility?
It is. It is not only a possibility, it's inevitable. The reason
inevitable, you feel?
Yeah, the reason.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. The reason is, if you look at purely from economic terms, the income disparity in China is growing very serious. What happens, you have the high Gini coefficient, which means it reached 0.46 according to the Chinese government. But the Chinese scholars within China, Chinese Academy of Social Science, they consider the Gini coefficient could reach over 0.5.
So what is inefficiency, please?
Gini coefficient.
Could you explain that? I don't understand.
In economic terms, what happens is, if the Gini coefficient is 1, if it's number 1, let me explain.
Is that an acronym or something?
It's an index.
Okay.
Economic index number. What happens if its number is 1? That means one person controls the total wealth of society.
I see.
If it's 0, then it means all the wealth of society is equally distributed among all the members of society.
Who puts out those figures?
Well, it's the economists can calculate this. It's produced by the Chinese government themselves.
They produce this figure?
Yeah, when they reached 0.46, which is extremely high. Based on the calculation of economists, if the index reached 0.4, then society is facing huge social upheavals and social stress because of the income disparity, income gap between the rich and the poor.
Okay.
So when they reach over 0.4, now 0.46, admitted by the Chinese government, then it's extremely dangerous for the stability of society, because then you have 5% of the members of society extremely wealthy. Then you have large member of society being marginalized and push the society to the bottom. That is
like a race to the bottom.
Yeah. What happens? One economist from China, He Qinglian, she mentioned that Chinese society is like upside down T, with a small number of the upper society and a small number of middle class, with a huge baseline of the poor people. ideally the society should be onion shaped with a small number of the rich people, small number of the poor people, with large number of people in the middle. But that's not the case in China because of the current
yeah, and places where that has developed. The United States, after the Second World War, there was a wide growth of middle class opportunity, GI Bill, all kinds of things, or Europe or something that happened. But the trend in the world is not in that direction. The trend for that index that you talk about, you studied at Harvard and you studied at Fletcher School, great schools. You understand these things. Could you please send me a link to that?
Sure.
To that index?
Yeah.
Is that an index that relates only to China?
No.
Or is it an index that has ramifications for the world? Does it judge the world in those terms and everything?
So one of the crucial index figures.
And it's watched by our opinion leaders?
It's done by all the people, economists and politicians, because it's a huge factor when you consider whether an economy is stable, whether the economy is in moving
what
toward
I'm
health.
asking is that as an index, it seems to me it would be good to have on our nightly news or something,
well,
like the Dow Jones or something.
Well, the economists, they are aware of it, but there's not a sufficient report on this kind of studies.
Who's responsible for putting that out, to get a measurement of the of that? What is it called? Index? What is
it's a Gini coefficient.
Gini?
Yeah,
G-E-N-I-E?
G-I-N-I.
G-I. Would you send me a link to that, please? And then people in the audience might be interested, because that would be a really good index for us to have readily before ourselves as we contemplate the human condition. It seems to me that's a very important index and everything.
Well, it's one of the factors that they study Chinese economy. And recently the Asian...
Has that been out for a long time, or is it
It's been for a while,
No, I
few
mean
years.
a little more quantitative. 1980s, 1900, or when did that index...
well, this has been devised for quite a while.
No, a little more... in the 60s, the 50s?
I don't remember exactly.
But it's more or less recent.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be a good measurement, it seems to me, for us to have, and I thank you for calling that to my attention.
Well,
but you said, you startled me in a way, that you think the government, the regime in China that runs things with such a powerful hand now, actually could fall.
Well, definitely, because of the when you marginalize the majority of the society.
Right, and that's the trend of the world now, in many people's mind. I don't know if you think it is. It seems that way to me.
Well, the according to studies, the China in Asia, according to research by the Asian Development Bank, the income disparity in China is the worst among all the Asian countries, except for Nepal. So then it's the second from the bottom in terms of the trend, which is very alarming for...
the trends would be particularly interesting.
Yeah, for the people, because you don't want to have a society where the majority of people are being, marginalized.
Particularly if you're a member of the majority of the people.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a lot of people like that who feel that way about the leaders of our world currently on a world scale, I would say.
Yeah,
whether it's only China, but the system that China has tried to buy into maybe is being challenged by the realization of the people of the world that it's not going to serve the interests of the people of the world. Only a few people who run the world are going to be served by it. Do you think that's possible?
It is.
Revolution might be available to the world, indicative for the world, yet even though Mr. Fukuyama said we've reached the end of history and everything's in order. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I think we have to look at the whole picture. What happens is China is becoming the world factory right now. Most of the products we buy
from China.
Is from China. But if you look at how these products become available to us, there are products, many of them made from the labor camps, which is a free
slave labor, practically.
Also, I mean, just slave labor is one thing.
Yeah.
There's also just labor camp where they house all the prisoner of conscience, and they make free products like 12, 13, 14 hours a day without, under torture, and they have to meet a certain quota. I met with some Falun Gong practitioners who were in the Chinese labor camps. We're talking about doctors. Dr. Charles Lee, who is a physician, American citizen. He's living in California, and he was in jail for 3 years in Chinese prison, making Christmas lights. making the
we'll be
shoes.
Them,
you see in the Walmart and those kind of things, and these people are making product like for 14 hours a day, every day,
for
and
practically nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. And then they also torture if you're not, fulfilling the quota. If you don't produce, and this is kind of things that we are.
And there's 87, did you say, 1,000 serious demonstrations in China last year? You got the figures now.
Well, those
are real demonstrations, despite all of the efforts and the authoritarian police state tactics that are delivered down upon people trying to organize. But maybe you could address that.
Yeah, well, this is what happens. In the year 2006, the Chinese Ministry of Public Security produced a number to the public that there were 87,000 group protests occurred in the year 2005, averaging about 6 minutes. Every 6 minutes there's a protest
uprising among the people in China.
In China
against the system or aspects of it.
Because of a range of issues like forced eviction from the homes, and there are injustice occurred to the peasants or for the unemployed and for the laborers and also members of a house church or Falun Gong practitioners.
And they say they're being Marxists for the people, that they are helping the masses to overthrow the oppression of the capitalists.
Well, the current Chinese political system make an irony, make a mockery
of satirical mockery.
Exactly.
And yet they still run with that idea, or they did. I heard the man talking. We're socialists,
Well, traditional communism ideally should be align themselves with the peasants and workers and working class.
Helping the people.
The proletarian class against the bourgeoisie class or the capitalists. But today, as we notice, the capitalists can be members of Communist Party. So it's really blurred the line. And then we ask as academics, who are the people can become capitalists in China today? Those members of the Communist parties, officials and their children and their relatives. For the most of the peasants and working class people, they have no chance to become capitalists in China.
Well, we got with some diminution of the extremes and everything, we have the same thing everywhere in the world. You've got a small group of people who go to the right schools. You've been to Harvard. They mingle and they do that, and then they get dynasties developing. The Bush and the Clintons, they get and everywhere in the world, you got a small group who runs everything, and the system that's in place by which the world is organized, maybe it's not adequate to what the future requires. A big change is in the wind, and none of our leadership elements within the world have an answer to how we're going to, on the basis of what political economic theory or whatever, we're going to organize the world in order to serve it as we move into a future that requires a fundamental change, and the world is devoid of elements of leadership adequate to what the future requires. That makes me very worried.
It is concerning, and I think there's I'm a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah, you said you're optimistic. I'm having a hard time being such.
Yeah, well, the thing is that there's if the humanity can stand up for justice, for human rights, for human dignities, and live truly in the spirit of truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, and be give up this greedy creed for power, selfishness, and ego, and those kind of negative elements, then there's hope.
It hasn't happened throughout all of human history, despite all our spiritual leaders telling us, take care of the least among you. I've noticed none of them have.
Well,
from Roman emperors to kings to the current group running the world now.
Well,
they take care of themselves and their own.
Yeah. Well, tragically, there are quite a lot of injustice and social ills in society.
Structurally, systemically.
Yeah, exactly. I concur with you on
that. You
do?
Okay.
I do.
That's a serious problem.
It is extremely serious. That's why there's a need for
vision.
Vision, and also to to upgrade the the mind and bring back the value and the character, the honor, and the virtue aspect of
our spiritual leaders
exactly,
of the past, the wisdom tradition.
Exactly, and I feel that one of the reasons that Falun Gong is being persecuted in the evil system is because it brings the alternative, brings the light to in the darkest system. When you bring up the the righteousness, the virtue, the good value system, and then the dark force come after it and try to suppress the light.
That's interesting.
And I think that, the practice bring the hope and bring the this light to humanity today. And when there's a suppression in China. For example, recently I was reading in the press, in AP, Associated Press, that the Chinese Olympic organizing center saying that there will be 43 type of people from 11 categories are not allowed to participate in Olympic Games.
Really?
This actually violates the Olympic Charter.
What were the categories?
Well, the categories are hostile foreign journalists, the underground church, and Falun Gong practitioners.
Falun Gong practitioners can't go to the Olympic Games?
opposing intellectual, outspoken
a Falun Gong practitioner from
not allowed.
America would not be allowed to participate as a sports person in the thing?
They cannot go to Olympic Games.
Suppose you go. You mean as a guest?
Yeah.
To watch?
Yeah.
You're not. What if you got a star? A star. What is it in Olympics? They lift the weight.
Yeah.
He can lift the weight more than anybody else, and he can get 200 ton up over his head or something. He would not be able to compete if he was Falun Gong?
No.
Is that true?
It's true.
They wouldn't
that's what they said.
They wouldn't let Tiger Woods play golf if
he were he would not be allowed.
You got to be kidding.
This is in the public, on record.
This is like Jesse Owens.
Exactly, exactly. But the sad thing is the Olympic Game Committee, the IOC, is not taking a stand to speak up against this because it's against. I was checking.
Well, one thing, a lot of those people who represent the world establishment had a lot of investment in China. Now they got a lot to amortize. They got a lot of interest in the money because they're all in part of a leading elite group of people, and they're all scratching each other's back like aristocrats always have. No.
Yeah, it's appalling that the corporate interests are being silent about it. What is more appalling is that the IOC is obligated under the Olympic Charter that on the article number 5, number 6, they state clearly no one should be discriminated against based on religion, gender, race, and all these political belief from the participating in the Olympic Games.
Human rights.
Yeah. So if China is violating the UN the Olympic Charter, then they shouldn't be accorded with this opportunity to host these games, because otherwise hosting this game by violating the Olympic Charter, then it's making a mockery of this.
But they won the contract, so they make the money, and there's a lot of money to be made, and they're going to make it a lot of prestige, and they're going to grow, and they're going to help, and they're going to wink, wink, and nod, nod, and that's the way the world's going to be going on, apparently.
Well, we just don't hope. We just don't hope to see that the game will be held the same way that Nazi Germany was able to do it, by barring, the
I think in 39 was the Nazi.
Yeah,
in 39, I think Hitler and his crew were very, 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 very popular. I'm not sure that's the case in the case of China.
Well,
87,000 demonstrations, and these intercontradictions and so forth, a small group. I'm not so sure that those perceptions about how a serious challenge to the ruling order, the legitimacy of the ruling order in China, might not be something that's going to be possibly tested, although Tiananmen Square and other things make it clear that they're willing to come down with magnificent, terrible force upon anybody who stands up to it. But then that applies to the whole world in a certain sense. I mean, there are variations on it, but the whole world, is not just. And we've never listened to our spiritual leaders except many years after they've passed and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. I was.
So I would hope you're right.
Yeah,
but I'm not very taking sanguine from history.
Yeah, I think that the conscience of the international community is being tested, whether they should speak up on this matter or not.
You mean on the Olympic matter or on the whole matter?
Yeah, on the whole matter, the human rights issues, and whether they, they should can live with their conscience to go into Olympic Games without addressing the human rights issues.
Well, that would be a specific issue, but there would be also other issues of a larger order about the whole system is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Because we have weapon systems now that are on hair trigger alert, and these people are challenging each other, and there's some conflicts that are there and everything, and you've got a lot of things coming from Islam, you got other things coming that people that sense that what's going on is not going to serve the interest. They don't know, and there's a danger of the weapon systems being unleashed that really is something that frightens me, and some spasm of hatred.
Exactly.
And if it does, apparently it would mean the end of our species.
Yeah.
And that's something that makes this existentially a very qualitatively new moment. Where would we look for inspiration or vision, or who is it that you might think that's coming forth with some sort of an idea, either politically or out of our universities or think tanks? Or we have not yet come up with what the future requires, it would seem, in terms of an order or an understanding of how a spaceship, a manual for operating spaceship Earth is an integrated system. Yeah. Where is it coming from? You like Falun Gong and that. There are other sources. Yeah. But we've only got a couple minutes left. What gives you a sense of optimism?
Well,
we only got a minute or two left.
I realize that there's a huge concern about the weapon mass destruction, and I know Graham Allison, a professor at the Kennedy School, he has written books about the concern of such big weapons being falling into hands of some radical groups, and we know that China has been providing nuclear technology to some of these countries like North Korea and Iranian and Pakistan. My hope of my optimism really comes from Falun Gong. The reason is the practice endorses the principles of truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. If every individual in human society practice these values, then we'll all live in harmony. We'll be all living in the spirit of humanity for one another. The world certainly needs good virtues, good moral qualities. It should come from within individual rather than
like in the evolution, things happen in what they call punctuated equilibrium. Things happen that maybe infuse the human spirit with good values like that. Send me links to Falun Dafa.
I will.
Would you also?
Yeah, thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
And I'll send you links to Bucky Fuller and some
Thank
things
you.
that give me some hope. But it's your pleasure to have had the perceptions of Erping Zhang. We just scratched the surface of a very interesting subject area. I think those weapons are in the hands of people who could well become terrorists themselves, and those are people who lead many of our nation states. They're not just some group off in a cave or something. They're the people that are running the systems that, if the people push them to the wall, will become dangerous. So the danger's elemental, and it's everywhere, it seems to me. But anyway, let's hope you're right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Good to talk.